Welcome back, everybody. This has been 3 weeks from we've continued. This is sort of our one non Pesach learning program. We are allowed to learn things not related to Pesach, even from Rosh Chodesh, Yachomi Rosh Chodesh. But anyway, so welcome everybody. And as we know, I mentioned, we have 19 shiurim as beginning today. It's preparing for Pesach through next Thursday, two a day, pretty much every day. And okay, and I just want to thank the Sasson family. I don't know if Jacob and Joseph are here, but they're sponsoring the series in memory of their father Albert Sasson Avraham Ben Salah. So thank you. We should have happy occasions. Okay, after 3 weeks, let's get right back into it. See how
Okay,
Rav
good.
Goren's doing and the Langers,
So you have two
etc.
weeks, and um, by the way, Pesach. Anyone's interested? During COVID, I gave a class. It's on the Torah in Motion site. It's on YouTube on Kitnios, the minig of Kitnios. So you can find that there. Okay, everyone, we'll just get back right into it. The last thing we did actually is we spoke about Rabbi Oberlander and his tshuva when he discussed me, etc. But we're in the middle of Rav Goren's. Basically taking apart the psak declaring the Langer children mamzerim. One thing though I want to add before we go, just one final thing about Tevilas Kalim. One of our listeners, Rabbi Mordechai, tells me, and he's in a position to know, that in Gateshead, until recently, when apparently some Hasidic students took it upon themselves, but the dishes were never toveled in the Gateshead yeshiva. The logic being that the yeshiva is not a person, and therefore it's not required to be toveled. Perhaps similar to what I quoted from Rabbi Scheinberg, that a yeshiva doesn't need to sell the chametz. But okay, so that's of interest there. Okay, let's pick up right with it. Rabbi Goren's response. The first, the second argument Rav Goren adopts is that, remember, originally we said there's no conversion. This whole thing that who said that Borikovsky ever converted? There's no witnesses to testify that he absolutely went to church and he baptized his son who was born after he converted. So there's lots of reasons to think that he wasn't Jewish and there wasn't a conversion. And there's testimony about that. Okay. Second argument, Rav Goren, on the assumption that there was a conversion. Rav Goren says, and this is going to be quite important and relevant to the news that we've seen over the last 15 years or so, even if there was a conversion, that is, even if there was a conversion before a reliable Beis Din, since he continued to live as a practicing Christian, which he did, he went to church. There's testimony from that. He named his son, his first son born, like Yesu or whatever the Polish Jesus name is. He baptized his son, for heaven's sakes. So even if he was conversion, since he continued to live as a Christian, Rav Goren argues that the conversion was nullified. Valid conversion, but the conversion is nullified. Now, what's the source that you can nullify a conversion? This is the big issue we all know about. Well, let me pull it up here. Take a look at the Rambam. This is Isurei Bia, chapter 13, halacha 15. It says as follows, that it begins by saying that because the motives, the court, the Beis Din, didn't think the people's motives were going to be proper, throughout the reign of David and Solomon, they didn't accept converts. Then it says, Rambam says, in David's time, they feared, that is, the rabbis feared that they sought to convert because of fear. That is, the people were worried, of King David, what he's going to do to them. And in Solomon's time, the fear was by the Batei Din that they would be motivated by the sovereignty, prosperity, and eminence that Israel enjoyed. So, okay, so you either have converts who are converting because they're afraid, which I guess is the story in the end of the book of Esther, or they want to join the great kingdom. So what does the Rambam say? That they refrain from accepting some converts. Why? Because a Gentile who seeks to convert because of the vanities of this world is not a righteous convert. Then it goes on. Nevertheless, there were many people who converted in the presence of ordinary people during the era of David and Solomon. The Supreme Sanhedrin would view them with skepticism. Since they immersed themselves, they would not reject them, but they would not draw them close until they saw what the outcome would be. Okay, so what does this mean? It says that nevertheless, there, even though they shouldn't have converted, there were people who converted. You don't need rabbis to have a conversion. You could have ordinary people. Let me see what the note here he has it. Okay, so in the commentary here it says that the people who converted them didn't know that they shouldn't have converted them. So then what do you do with them? They've been converted. They've been converted validly. The Rambam says that since they did go through a valid conversion, they couldn't be completely rejected, but they wouldn't draw them close until they would so what the outcome would be. So in other words, they converted halachically, but there is a period of abeyance where they're not really Jews, they're not really non-Jews, they're somewhere in the middle. But already we see here that the idea is that just because someone converts doesn't mean they're Jewish. Now, this is a strange thing. Either you're Jewish or you're not Jewish. What's this middle ground? And there's a lot of discussion in the commentaries of what this means, that Loma Karvinosan ad shetera achrisam, that they wouldn't bring them close until they saw what the outcome will be. In the note here, it points out that the Shulchan Aruch interprets this to mean that the conversion was effective, but yet you don't allow them to marry. Others have different opinion, but it's strange here. So could this be a source that you can nullify a conversion? Um, I mean, there's a waiting period. So what this means is that apparently what this means is that if during this waiting period you see that they're not righteous converts, then the conversion doesn't take effect. What else does it mean when it says they wouldn't draw them close until they saw what the outcome would be? Yes, the Shulchan Aruch reads it that it's a valid conversion, but you don't marry them until you see what the outcome. But others read it very differently, that it's a conversion because it's not a conversion l'shem shamayim. It's a conversion for another reason, which you shouldn't do. But if you do it ex post facto, it's a valid conversion. Nevertheless, however, the Rambam is telling us that it's a valid conversion al tanai, on condition that they end up being good Jews. But if they don't end up being good Jews, then it's not a valid conversion. So that would be the exact case of the Barakovskis. Barakovsky converted. He converted not l'shem shamayim. He converted, as we know, because basically this father-in-law forced him to convert. In fact, one of the reasons given is the girl was underage. She was 14 or 15, and he could have been sent to jail. And the only way in Poland to get rid of this is if they married. And the only way they can marry, well, first they married in a church. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this to you. The first marriage of Barakovsky and Chava was in a church. And then the father-in-law, this is a Hasidic family, by the way. He came to them and he basically, without the father's approval, he could be sent to jail. So there's pressure for him to convert and then get married Jewishly, and then there won't be any statutory rape. All that is pressure. So since he's not converting l'shem shamayim, and even without that, it's obviously he's not converting l'shem shamayim. He's converting for the sake of marriage. Therefore, his conversion is dependent on whether he becomes a good Jew or not. Now, based upon this halacha in the Rambam, where we see that a conversion is not binding, if it's not l'shem shamayim, to a period of time, whatever that is, time, the Rambam doesn't tell you, the Rogachover, and the Rav Goren quotes the Rogachover, the famous Rav Yosef Rosen, this genius, the Rogachover, who says that if you worship Avodah Zarah after the conversion, that's proof that the original conversion was not sincere and thus invalid. And that's exactly what Barakovsky did. He was going to church. Now you could say, well, wait a second. What about the fact that he was Machal Shabbos? Shouldn't that be enough to avoid the conversion? That's going to be a problem for Rav Goren to say, however, because as we will see towards the end, when we deal with another controversy, the Seidman case, Rav Goren converted people all the time who were Machal Shabbos, and many Rabbanim converted them. And to say that all these conversions are no good, no one said that in those days, or almost no one said that. So therefore, it has to be something. In other words, the idea was that you can convert, and as long as you accept the Jewish people, even if you're violating even basic halachot, there was a position among many great rabbis. Um, Maybe I shouldn't say no one did or most didn't, but at least half, I think, of the great rabbis, that even violation of Shabbos is not enough to void the conversion after the fact. But everyone would agree, it seems, that if you worship Avodah Zarah, at least if you read the Rambam this way, that it's an invalid conversion. Now, let me read you what Rav Goren says on page 138. Actually summarize it for you. He says, from this Rambam, we see that anyone who converts for benefit, personal benefit, not L'Shem Shemayim. What does L'Shem Shemayim mean? L'Shem Shemayim means that you're convinced of the truth of Judaism. But if you do it for any other reason, your status totally omed. It's in abeyance until we see what happens in the end. If you behave properly as a Jew, and he says Yehudi Shomer Torah mitzvah. So if you take the Rav Goren at his word here, this means that if you violate Shabbos, it wouldn't be good. But we know that many people he converted were not Shomer Shabbos. And it says that if you observe Torah mitzvos, your geros is valid from the time you converted. That is ex post facto. But if you're not Shomer Torah mitzvahs after the conversion and you live like a goy, and you return, he says, to your earlier life, namely a Christian, your gerus, your conversion, is invalid lemafreya uche'ilu lo hayager. It's as if you never were converted. So therefore, let's say these people convert. The Rambam says we hold them in abeyance. If during that period they marry someone, but if they continue to be worshiping idols, according to the Rambam, ab initio, it's as if they haven't converted, and the marriage is not valid. So if they married a Jew, it's not a binding marriage. And then Rav Goren says the Rambam makes this clear in the next halacha, Tet Zayin. What does Tet Zayin say? Look at this. It says that Shlomo converted women and married them, and also Shimshon converted women and married them. And it says, the Rambam says, it's well known these women converted only because of the ulterior motive. And their conversion was not under any valid beis din. Hence the Tanakh, and you could see certain psukim and quotes, considered it as if they were Gentiles or remained forbidden. Moreover, their conduct ultimately revealed their initial intent. What was that? Shehein ovdos kochavim azaros, for they would worship false deities and build platforms for them. And therefore, it says, even though the pshat is that Shlomo also worshipped this, they led him astray. The sages say, well, that's just they're exaggerating Shlomo's crime because he allowed it to go on. So here we see that Tanakh is telling us, is assuming that they're regarded as here. What is the pasuk? So if you look in, it says Judges 14:3. What does Shimshon's father say? Is there no woman among the daughters of your brothers and among all my people that you go and take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? So we see here that she was regarded as not from Klal Yisrael. They quote another passage here about Shlomo. What does it say? Parak Yud Aleph, Pasuk Dalet. It was a time of Solomon's gold age. His wives turned away his heart after other gods. So they're saying they're regarding them as that's really not a great proof there, but because they could be Jewish and worshiping other gods. But okay, so so but at least the Rambam testifies that they were not regarded as Jewish. And then the Rambam says, but you have a problem. What's the problem, actually? What do you do about halacha zud zayin? Look at this. If a court did not check a potential convert and did not inform of the mitzvah, so you come before a beis din and they don't tell you what the mitzvahs are. So what is that? How can you convert without knowing the mitzvahs? Well, they could tell you that they could say, do you want to join the Jewish people without telling you about Shabbos and Kashrus, all these things. They don't tell you about the mitzvos and the punishment for failure to observe mitzvos. And he, that is the convert, future convert, circumcised himself and immersed in the presence of three ordinary people. He's a convert. You don't need a beis din. That's the beis din, the three people. Even if it's discovered that he converted for an ulterior motive, since he circumcised himself and converted, he has departed from the categories of Gentiles, and we view him with skepticism until his righteousness is revealed. Okay, so here you see the same sort of thing. We hold him in abeyance to see if he's a Ger Tzedek. But then look at this. Even if afterwards the convert worships false deities, he's like an apostate Jew. That is, he's not a goy. He does his conversion isn't invalid, doesn't retroactively invalidate it. He's regarded as an apostate Jew, a sinning Jew. If he consecrates a woman, if he is Makadesh Shanisha, the Kiddushin is valid, and it's a mitzvah to return his lost object. For since he immersed himself, he became a Jew. For this reason, Samson and Solomon maintained their wives, even though their inner feelings, namely that they worshipped idolatry, were revealed. Okay, so now we have a real problem. In Halacha Yud Zayin, he says that the wives of Shimshon and Shlomo were Jewish, even though they worshipped idolatry, and that if someone converts for the not for the right reasons, we hold him in abeyance. But if he worships idols, he's regarded as an apostate Jew. But that's in direct contradiction, it seems, to what we just saw the previous halacha that about the wives of Shimshon and Shlomo, and also the halacha 15, where we say that at least the Rogachover reads it as if you worship idols during this period where we're checking you out, your conversion's completely invalid. Going back, Lamafreya. So this is a big problem. Everyone deals with this contradiction. So the critique of Rav Goren, of Rav Tzalel Jolti, he was on the Beis Din Godel. He's really the only one to, in detail, attack Rav Goren's psak. And I have to tell you, he doesn't attack him with respect. He degrades him. He says in his article, he says, I don't hate Rav Goren. And he says, but I'm an enemy of Rav Goren. Okay, I'm glad he says he doesn't hate him because we're not supposed to hate other Jews. But he says, I'm an opponent of his. I'm not an enemy. He said, I'm not an enemy. I'm an opponent. That's what he says. Now, Rav Jolti says, so since in Halacha 15, the Rogachover says that the conversion is invalid lemafreya if you worship idols, what do you do about Halacha 17 when he says just the opposite? So Rav Jolti says it must be that in Halacha 15, the Rogachover's understanding the Rambam as referring to right after conversion. If right after conversion you worship idolatry, the conversion's no good. But if you live as a Jew for a time, even if it's during this time, where we watch over you, you have that time, and then you worship idols, then you're not the conversion can't be revoked. Rav Goren reads it a little differently. He reads it as again, he calls attention to the contradiction. He says the words of the Rambam, Sosri Melos Elu. On the one hand, we say Choshishim Loachi Spartzit Kaso. We watch over him to see if he's righteous, and on the other hand, we say that even if he worships idols, Harehu Ki Yisrael. So then why do we say, Rav Goren, in the earlier halachas, why do we say that we don't bring him close until we see what's going to happen? What do you mean? We just see right here that he worships idols, and we still regard him as a Jew. And Rav Goren says as follows: it's possible that when we say in Halacha 15 that his conversion is in abeyance, that's only l'chumrah. That is, we don't bring them close to put them into Klal Yisrael to marry them until we see if they're going to be righteous, but not l'kula. In other words, we can't get rid of a conversion if it's already done. We can't say that if someone who converts and worships idols and then is Mikadesh Shanisha, then it's not valid. That we can't do. So that's how he reads the contradiction between 15 and 17. But it's a big problem. It's a big contradiction there. Now, actually, the idea of Rav Goren that a convert, cannot be entirely brought into the Jewish people was actually found if you go back to Halacha 9 in this very section of the Rambam. it says if we see people, a female convert who conducts herself like a Jew, and a male convert, he does everything he needs to do. What does Rambam say? They're considered as righteous converts, even though there are no witnesses to testify who people were converted. Nevertheless, if they want to marry among the Jewish people, that we don't do unless they bring witnesses. So we see here that you can be Jewish. He says they're Jewish, but we don't welcome them entirely. I mean, I was thinking about this because I've been away the last 2 weeks. So I was in Panama. It's also in Florida. But I was in Panama, and if you know Panama, I'm sure many of the people listening to us right now, you've been to Panama and you've seen the community. Um, about 17,000 Jews, they told me, 15,000 Syrians. Okay, and you all know that at least if you don't know, I'll tell you, don't want to offend anyone, but this is just the reality. In fact, maybe we should have a whole class on this. I don't know if someone from the Syrian community would do it, but I could do it. The Syrian community does not accept converts. As simple as that. How could the Syrian community not accept convert? It's a halacha in you see this in Nach. Rus. You see it in the Gemara. You see it in the Rambam. Every single code. So that's an old story that the Syrian community dating back from the early 20th century. So what does it mean not to accept converts? It's not that they say the convert isn't Jewish. It's not that if a Syrian is with you at the airport and you want to make a minyan, they're not going to say, well, we can't make a minyan because you only have 10 and this guy's a convert. No, that they don't say that at all. But in their communities, they don't recognize converts. They don't welcome converts. And I know you're thinking, what about all the tens of times that we're told to love the convert? And okay, that's for a different time. But I was thinking of this Rambam when I was in Panama because right when I got back from Panama, because here you have an example of someone who is a convert. They recognize the people as converts, but it's in abeyance. It's not they don't treat them like converts. They don't treat them like complete Jews. They don't they know they're Jewish, but they say you can't marry us, you can't be counted into a minyan with us, you can't be a member of our community. I have to tell you though, I was a little impressed knowing the Syrian community that the way I know it, that in Panama, the day school there, which is run by the Syrians, we're not talking about, let's say, like Flatbush in New York, which today is like overwhelming Syrian, but it's not run by the Syrians, so they can't, it's not like Magen David or one of the other schools where they don't allow converts or children of converts or grandchildren of converts, and how far back they go. That's can't get a straight answer to this one. It's not, but the community in Panama, and I asked this question, you go to Panama, you can go 3 days is enough. One day, the Panama Canal Zone, Old Panama City. The next day, you go to the Monkey Island, the rainforest, all that. And then you have a tour of the Jewish area, see five shuls in 4 different buildings. And one of them is a big Ashkenazic shul, taken over by Chabad now, actually, but pretty much. But in the school, which is officially like run by the Syrians, at least that's how it was explained to me, they do allow the Ashkenazim go there, and I was told that they do allow children of converts in the school, something which you won't get in Flatbush or down by the Jersey Shore. So that's, I think, a similar thing to what Rambam says. Now, Rav Goren would say that even according to Rav Jolte's explanation of the Rogachover, that one who immediately after the conversion worshipped idols, and that's why it's not valid, the conversion of Barakovsky is still not valid, even according to how Rav Jolte explains the Rogachover, because, as we know, Barakovsky never lived as a Jew. He continued to live as a Christian. I think Rav Jolte, although it doesn't mention this in response to Rav Goren, I think Rav Jolte's point would be that we don't accept the Rogachover on this, that we assume the halacha is like the pshat, that if you worship idols, that I don't know what he would do with how he himself would explain the Rambam in halacha 15, but normally we assume that if someone converts, even, and I'll read you what the Tashbeit says in a few minutes, even as soon as you convert, once you convert, right after that, if you go right from your conversion to go worship idolatry, the classic sources say that someone who converts and then reverts is still a sinning Jew. And the early sources don't say that you have to be a sinner like a year later or 6 months. They just say that, and I'll read you what the Tashbeit says in a minute. And Rav Goren understands the Rogachover to be saying that when the Rambam says that if you revert to idolatry, remember, it doesn't affect your conversion, that's when you had been living as a good Jew and then reverted to idolatry. Or if you converted l'shem shamayim and then you revert to idolatry. However, one who never converted l'shem shamayim to begin with, that is, he was never a righteous convert, if he starts worshiping Avodah Zarah, the conversion is invalid. So that, yeah, look, you got to go through the various halachot in the Rambam to see how they can work together. They do seem to be in contradiction. All the commentaries discuss it. As I said, Rav Goren, he distinguishes between someone who converts l'shem shamayim and then worships Avodah Zarah, that he would be regarded as a sinning Jew, versus someone who doesn't convert for a good reason, and then he worships Avodah Zarah. He would be the one that the conversion never takes effect. That is, even from the beginning, and that's how he thinks the rugged shover would read it. Now, let me just clarify. I kept saying idolatry. I mean Avodah Zarah, because as I've said many times, David Berger has made this point. Christianity is Avodah Zarah. It's not idolatry. They're not worshiping idols. And Rav Goren continues to cite other sources that agree with this opinion. Okay, I want to read you now something else from Rav Goren on page 144. He continues. What you try to do as a posek here is you try to make arguments upon arguments. If not all the arguments are convincing, that's okay. Because if you have enough arguments, you build a case. And all the lawyers know this. And now on page 144, this section 36 is titled that the conversion of Barakovsky was revoked when he returned to his bad ways. Let's see. Actually, I think we don't need to read this because this is the same thing I already told you outside. He says that he lived as a Christian, and then when he came to even in Eretz Yisrael, he lived as a Christian. He went to church. He lived in a Christian environment. He crossed himself, etc., etc. But then it gets really interesting because in this section, Rabbi Goren cites a responsum that appears in a volume called Minchas Yitzchak, Volume 1. Now, Minchas Yitzchak is written by Rav Yitzchak Jacob Weiss. Yitzchak Yaakov Weiss was the head of the Eda Haredit, the most extreme of the extreme, the anti-Zionists. If you walk up in Jerusalem and you go up the opposite side, King George, what is that, Strauss? You keep going till you get to the top and then go down to the bottom where by Meir Sharim on the right, you have that, their center. I think it's called Zupnik. And that's the Eda Haredit.
Kikar Shabbat.
Yeah, well, you keep going up there. Yeah, Kikar Shabbat. That's where you have the cross, you have four directions, exactly. So that is the center of the Eda Haredit. The Eda Haredit are the ones that broke away from Agudas Yisrael when Agudas Yisrael decided to join the Israeli government in 1948. Agudas Yisrael deputy signed the Declaration of Independence, Ravitcha Meir Levin. And there's a lot of talk about this now because if you follow the Haredi news, you know that about the elections for the World Zionist Organization, the Haredi world is split between those who oppose and those who support. I have to tell you, from what Rabbi Doron said, I never heard of these elections till 5 years ago. Apparently, there's always been these elections, but they kept them secret. And there's so much money at stake here, so now everyone knows about it. So since there's a lot of money, the Haredi world is very involved with it. In fact, someone emailed me, one of the listeners, what's the Das Torah about voting? And I said, it's conflicting Das Torah. But I have to tell you something. I asked someone who knows the community well, and he gave me an answer, and I'm not satisfied by it. Look, at the end of the day, the fact that you have the Rosh Yeshiva of Lakewood and the Rosh Yeshiva of Ner Yisrael, and that these individuals, for all their learning, are on the side of the Peleg, the most extreme anti-Zionist in Israel, not on the side of the mainstream Haredim, that itself is enough to make your head explode in shock. I mean, Ner Yisrael, for heaven's sakes, that was always supposed to be the most liberal of the Haredi yeshivas. Rav Aaron Cutler kept Rav Ruderman off the Moetzes Gedolei Torah precisely because he allowed college. So that's crazy enough. But Lakewood, that they're supposed to get money there from all of us, and that they're allying themselves. And they've been doing this for years. They allow with the Peleg faction. So obviously, I don't approve of this. I don't like this. I think it's disgraceful. But I have to say, if you want to be honest, in this case, I have to say that I think they're right to a certain extent from their perspective, and I'll tell you why. Um, and I don't understand this group called the name of the group is Eretz HaKodesh, who are going around convincing the Haredim to vote. Now, why do I say what I say? All of us who vote, you have to affirm, and the parties have to affirm something called the Jerusalem Declaration. Now, I want to read you now leaving aside what it says about Zionism and all that, because I guess Eretz HaKodesh can say, well, their Zionism is Torah Zionism, so they're not in opposition. Okay, that I get. I'm not going to argue with that. But listen to the fourth, I think it's the fourth thing that everyone who votes has to affirm, and the parties need to affirm. Encouraging recruitment and service in the Israel Defense Forces and the security forces, and strengthening them as a protective force of the Jewish people living in Zion, as well as encouraging full national service for anyone exempted in law from service in the IDF. Again, everyone who votes has to affirm that they believe in encouraging recruitment and service in the IDF and in encouraging national service for those who are exempted, either men or women. This party, the Eretz HaKodesh, in no way can affirm this. In fact, they openly oppose enlistment in the army for their people and national service. So when the Rosh Yeshiva of Ner Yisrael or the Rosh Yeshiva of Lakewood gets up and says, we cannot be part of this election because we cannot sign on to the Jerusalem program, unlike Rabbi Doron, with all due respect to him, who yesterday in my town spoke about how great it is that all the Eretz HaKodesh and all they're involved, I say just on the contrary. Eretz HaKodesh is not being honest. They're affirming this and they don't believe it. And they're opposed to enlistment and they're opposed to national service. And the Rosh Yeshiva of, even though I hate their ideology, the Rosh Yeshiva of Lakewood and of Ner Yisrael, they are being honest. And they're saying we cannot sign on to this because we do not accept this. And we don't accept Zionism. And they certainly don't accept the final thing. So I think you need to respect the Rosh Yeshivas and the Moetzes Gedolei Torah for saying we're not going to sell our soul just for money. And if anyone can explain to me how, in good conscience, this Eretz HaKodesh can take money and join something, signing something, agreeing to something which they do not, and it's not that secretly they don't agree with it, but outwardly they agree with it. Outwardly, they say we oppose it. All the Rosh Yeshiva who've signed on oppose with national service and oppose IDF service for soldiers. So that's how I see it. Okay, so getting back, I'm sure there'll be some questions or comments at the end. I'll look at. So who is Rav Jacob Weiss? So you have the Eda Haredit. When the Aguda joined the Israeli government, so the people broke away from it. Then the Troy Karta even became more extreme. They broke away from it. And this is a conglomerate of different groups. Satmar type, but not, I mean, the Eda Haredi is not Satmar, and the original opponents, the old Yishuv, were actually, don't come from the Hasidic world at all. But now you have the different groups, the Rabaro types, you have the Briskers, you have all these different types, and they have a based in, they have a rabbi, so who was their rabbi? Rav Jacob Weiss, Talmud Chacham. I think he was from Romania, if I'm not mistaken. And then he was in Manchester, England. And you've had a number of Rav Sternbach now is the head of it. I mean, it's officially anti-Zionist. Rav Sternbach's an interesting case because in his early writings, you can find him referring to Rav Kook. So he's had a change. So that's that group. But I have to tell you that Rabbi Yitzhak Yaakov Weiss, before the first few volumes of his responsa were written when he was in Manchester, and he wasn't a member of the Eda Haredi. He was a member of the general Jewish community there. Someone I knew, he was on his based in. He was the chief rabbi, Rabbi Alexander Altman. Rabbi Weiss was on the based in. And I asked Professor Altman once, because then he came to America, he was Professor at Brandeis. I knew him. I said, were you surprised when Rabbi Weiss, Professor Altman, by the way, was one of the leading rabbis in Berlin. Before the war, he taught also at the Berlin Rabbinical Seminary, and in October of 1938, he becomes communal rabbi of Manchester, and he remains there for 20 years, and then he became professor at Brandeis. I asked him, were you surprised when Rabbi Weiss becomes head of the Eda Charetis, head rabbinic figure, and he said he was shocked because he had his whole existence with him and relationship with him, he had no idea that he was so extreme. But if you look at the tshuva, you'd see his correspondence, let's say, with Satmar Rebbe and things, but you wouldn't necessarily know that he's going to be the Eda Charetit. So the great irony is that Rav Goren is citing the Minchas Yitzhak. So how is he? What does the Minchas Yitzhak say? If you look in Minchas Yitzhak, they're classic Chuvot. I think there's 9 volumes of. He was a great posek, and Rav Avadia quotes him. Incidentally, if you look at the early volumes of Minchas Yitzhak, he quotes Rav Avadia Yosef Zebia Omer. Once he becomes Rav in the Eda Charedit, there's no more mentions of these like Zionist type of rabbis like Ravad Yosef. That's so you say Torah. Shouldn't Torah be about citing everyone? I mean, if you how could you not cite important sources? No, that's what it means to be part of the Eda Charedis. I believe that for Moshe Sternbach to become Rav of the Eda Charedis, he had to guarantee that his granddaughters or great granddaughters won't go to Beis Yaakov, because they oppose Beis Yaakov, that sort of thing. So why does Rav Goren cite the Minchas Yitzhak? Because the Minchas Yitzhak has a very relevant case in number 20. The title is Benidon Ger She'eno Tzedek. This is volume 1, number 121. The case is a man, Echad Mikale Hadas, not a serious person. He marries a woman with chuppah and kiddushin. Then he leaves her without a get, so she's an aguna. And he won't divorce her at all. But when they investigated it, they found out that he is, and this is a case, I guess, for Manchester. They found out that his mother was not Jewish, and she converted by someone, not a rabbi. And in other words, so she got the title of Jewish. However, neither she nor her son ever lived as good Jews. They never, lo nagu imo beno kadasi. So then the question is, can we say that since she converted, but she never at all was religious in any way, that it's not a valid conversion, and we can free the woman from her marriage? So he investigates it. Now I have to say, however, that there was, and I'll tell you that Rabbi Weiss concludes himself that it shouldn't be a valid conversion. So this, for Rav Goren, is very important, because here you have an example of an accepted posek where there was a conversion, but the people never lived, the mother never lived as a religious person, and therefore the child wouldn't be Jewish. Therefore, it's invalid. So that's obviously relevant to exactly parallel to the case with Barakovsky. In fact, I'll cite you from what he says from the Minchas Yitzhak here. The words are, he says, the woman, this is Minchas Yitzhak, in his opinion, who married this man, it's as if, the woman, the Jewish woman who married this man who won't give her a get, it's as if she married a Nochri, b'chuppah b'kiddushin, demuteris linasei la'acher chutz mikohen. So here you have a case. A woman converts. It's a phony conversion. She has a son. The son they think is Jewish. He marries a woman. Then he leaves this woman and won't give her a divorce. So she's an aguna. But we find out that the man's mother wasn't really Jewish, even though she had a conversion. It's a phony conversion. Her lifestyle didn't change in the slightest. So that means the husband isn't really Jewish. So the woman's not an aguna. And this is exactly Rav Goren's argument, that this Barakovsky had a conversion. Or actually might never even had a conversion. That's his first argument. But even on the assumption he had a conversion, the fact is he never lived as a good Jew in any way. In fact, in the tshuva of Minchas Yitzhak, it doesn't say that the woman actually went to church or anything. It just is she's completely religious. And Barakovsky went to church, so clearly it's an invalid conversion. So therefore, they were never married. Chava and Barakovsky were never married. Therefore, when she marries Otto Langer years later, it's she's not an adulteress. There's no mamzerus there. Should be a simple case, but it's a little more complicated. First, I have to tell you that what Rav Goren doesn't say, And this, I think, is important, that the case of the Minchas Yitzchak is the conversion, there was no Beis Din. There was only one man who did his hocus pocus and said, you're converted. And so you say, well, who ever heard of a conversion without a Beis Din? There is a Shita. And this is the Rif, that B'diavad, conversion before one person, is a valid conversion. And then you publicly live as a Jew. So the question is, the Minchas Yitzchak wants to know is whether we should be choshesh for the Shita of the Rif in such a case. And so the Minchas Yitzchak concludes, no, but it's not like there was a real Beis Din. So there's an additional argument. It's not really parallel to the Barakovsky case. Furthermore, we don't know in the end if the Minchas Yitzchak actually halacha l'maisa adopted this, because he has a responsum after this by Rav Dov Berish Wiedenfeld, the Shabina Rav. And the Shabina Rav doesn't want to be mater. The Shabina Rav thinks that we have to be machmir in a case like this, where the person was regarded as a Jew. And so in the end, although the Minchas Yitzchak thinks there should be a heter for this woman, he's dealing with a case where there isn't really a Beis Din. So it's a questionable conversion for other reasons. And second of all, we don't know in the end, halacha maisa, what the Minchas Yitzchak did, because the Shabina Rav thinks you should be machmir in that case also. I have to tell you something else also. The Tashbetz, Rav Shimon ben Semach Duran, great sage in North Africa. In fact, let me get you his years, because this isn't. He's one of the. He deals 1361 to 1444. He dealt a lot with issues of Jews who left Spain, or Anusim in Spain, or those who left Spain and came to North Africa, returned to Judaism. You had people who were married in Spain, and then maybe the one person left. Do you need a divorce? All those sorts of matters dealing with the Anusim, the conversos. So he deals a lot with these sorts of issues. And I want to read you what he says. Because this is something that today, if someone said this, most people would say this is like Reform Judaism, but they're conservative. He says, listen to this. He's talking about people who convert to Christianity. People who convert to Judaism and then return to Christianity. Listen to this. Because you could have a person who, a Jew, let's say in Spain, who marries a non-Jewish woman, and the child is not Jewish. And then the child, let's say, comes to North Africa and converts to Judaism, and then could revert to Christianity. Mi shelo niskayer elasha achas. Someone converted, and an hour later, chazar l'sura la'altar, immediately after conversion, returns to the bad ways, v'avad avoda zara. That is, someone converts to Judaism and immediately leaves the Beis Din, walks down the street, walks into the church, worships avoda zara, v'chila shabbosos b'farhesia. And immediately, this is Friday, and on the next day, violates Shabbos publicly, kimenago kodem sheniskayer, uminhu, and this person is a min, umin hamordimhu, and he's one of the people that we lower into the pits. Nevertheless, ve'afilu hachi chashvinan le Yisrael meshumad, the Kiddushin. He is regarded as a meshumad, a Jewish meshumad, and his Kiddushin is a valid Kiddushin. So here we see the idea that it doesn't really matter. Once you convert, this would be in opposition to Rav Goren, and now we can begin to understand the great rabbis who opposed Rav Goren. It's very hard for us today to understand how any of these rabbis opposed Rav Goren, other than the fact that they reject the evidence, but there was testimony to it. Because I don't think any rabbi today, if you said that someone converted and then they soon were going to a church, they would say it's a valid conversion. They've revoked conversions for a lot less. But we see that the Tashbetz says otherwise. And the Tashbetz is one of the great Sephardic figures. Furthermore, Rav Jolti, in his response to Rav Goren, he cites a tshuva from Rav Kook. Actually, you can find two discussions of this. You can find it in his book Ezras Kohen, number 14, page 40, and you can also find it in Das Kohen, number 53. There was a case in Egypt. A man, this wouldn't be a Muslim because Muslims couldn't convert, but you had English people, English soldiers. Otherwise, he falls in love with this woman. He converts to Judaism. He marries her, and then not long after that, he abandons her and leaves her and won't give her a get. He's out of the picture, whatever. So the question of the rabbi in Egypt was Rav Aaron Cohen. It was an Ashkenazic rabbi, by the way, in Cairo. His name was Rav Aaron Cohen. The question was, he thinks that you can void this conversion because the person who converted never lived as an observant Jew, and it's a case of aguna, and therefore we can say the conversion was voided, and the woman can remarry. Rav Kook refuses to invalidate the conversion. It doesn't matter. Once you let me read you what Rav Kook says. Kasha ma'od hamsi heter. It's very difficult to find a heter. Me'achar shemasav mochichim alav she'en kavaso klal l'shem shamayim. He says even though he says that his actions were show that it wasn't l'shem shamayim. Why not? He says. His words are, and he says that the rabbis wanted to spare this woman from Aguna by being mevatel the geros umafreya, and Rav Kook says, I can't agree with you. He says that, and this says how terrible this is, that these people make believe they'll be religious, etc. But devarim shabalev and devarim. As far as Rav Kook is concerned, it doesn't matter what the person was thinking. He went before Beis Din. He agreed to the conversion. The fact that in his mind he was thinking he's not going to be religious, the fact that right afterwards we see he's not religious, it doesn't matter. We have the halacha that someone who converts and then worships Avodah Zarah, he's a sinning Jew. And Rav Kook refuses to be mevatel the gerus, and Rav Jolti cites this. So if you want to know how Rav Jolti could say that it's a valid conversion, because once you have a conversion, it remains valid and you cannot revoke it. No matter what, you cannot revoke the conversion. If it's done before a valid Beis Din and the person is recognized as a Jew, you can't. I have to say, though, that Rav Jolti was unaware of something, that there's another case that Rav Goren deals with. I mean, sorry, not Rav Goren, Rav Kook. Rav Kook contradicts himself because in that tshuva, he does say that Dvarim Shabalev and Midvarim, you can't abolish a conversion. But in another tshuva, a tshuva written to Argentina, this decree of the Syrians not to allow conversion is written to Argentina. That's where it begins. And I have to tell you that in Argentina, the rule was they would not convert anyone. And anyone who wanted to convert had to go to the land of Israel, which is a very difficult trip in those days. And if you're converted in the land of Israel, that means you're serious and you come back, then you're a good convert. What this has morphed into in America is something far removed from the original takana. The original takana, first of all, was only conversion for the sake of marriage. And there was always an out that you can go to the Beis Din Gadol in Jerusalem. What it's become now, and you can walk in, and by the way, when you walk into the shuls, the Syrian shuls, all the Syrian shuls have the decree on the wall right there. But you can read the decree and you can see what originally it was. I mean, it was supposed to be for marriage. If someone has nothing to do with marriage, if you have this like 16-year-old boy or girl who just falls in love with Judaism and converts and is a Ger Tzedek, nothing to do with marriage, that is not part of the original Syrian takana, and it's not part of even in America, but it's become part of the takana today, and doesn't matter why you convert. The only heter, perhaps, would be a child, a baby. If you convert not perhaps, if you convert a baby, as far as I know, everyone assumes it's not a problem. But I'll tell you two other things about this. One is to show you how crazy and how far this has gone. Is I know a case where someone is not a product of a conversion. That is, if you have a father and a mother, and one of them converts, they're not welcome in the Syrian community. But I know a case where the father is not Jewish, and the mother is Jewish. And so there's no conversion here. It's 100% Jewish. So I spoke to two of the rabbis in the Syrian community about this, and they both said to me that you're right, that according to the takana, this person should be welcome in the community, but it's the spirit of the takana. So I find that strange. And a second thing I'll tell you is I was in a Syrian community, has to remain nameless, obviously, and with the rabbi. And the rabbi points to someone there and says, this person, he's a Baal Tshuva, and he's now in our community. And he says to me that this person, I forget now if it's the mother or the father, one of them is a convert. And he says, but I'm not telling anyone. So here's a rabbi from the Syrian community telling me that because this person became religious in their community, and then later he learned that there was a conversion. The rabbi told me that he is keeping it secret, and apparently no one knows. And because what's he supposed to do now? Kick the person out of the community? He become religious because of this community. That's his only community. So that I thought was interesting. But in the tshuva that Rav Kook writes to the Syrian community, in which he supports their takana, he says that if you convert without observing Torah and mitzvos, ein kan gerus klal. There's no gerus. So Rav Kook says two things exact opposite. One tshuva, he says that if you convert and you're not observant, it's not a valid conversion. And the other one, he says that what you think doesn't matter. It's only what you agreed to do. And as long as you go through the motions and go through the proper ceremony, and we assume that there was a valid conversion, and you're just a sinning Jew. So I was involved in a case in my quasi-rabbinic role of this where someone converted and was not religious immediately after the conversion. And I spoke to someone, I don't want to mention the names of the rabbis now, but someone who's a big Rav, Dafka, not of the modern Orthodox, in the Haredi world, who's based in, is recognized by everyone, by the Rabbanut, etc. And I told him the situation, that even though he converted this person is not observant. And he said to me, and that had implications to me, like, what do I do? And he told me, and if I said the name, everyone in the New York area would know who I'm talking about. He said, I'm sorry to hear this, but this person is a sinning Jew. He did not say it's the conversion's invalid. He said, this person's a sinning Jew. This is someone, by the way, who studied for many months. But it was, there was for a romantic reason, but went through everything. And that's what he told me. Rav Jolti, after he cites Rav Kook, he also cites another tshuva sefer called Sur Yaakov, that a woman who immediately after conversion reverts to Christianity is still to be regarded as a Jew. So here we have a basic machlokas. You have Rav Goren adopting the position, which later will become the standard, of course, Haredi position, that if you convert, and right after conversion, we see that you weren't serious about your Judaism, your Machal Shabbos, whatever it is, Kal V'chomer, Ben Benoshel Kal V'chomer, if you live as a Christian, the conversion never took effect. And Rav Jolti arguing, no, once there's a conversion, that it's a valid conversion, even then the person who sins later is regarded as a sinning Jew. And you could read each of these approaches into the Rambam. That's what makes it so difficult today. But there is obviously the great irony that there is no way in the world that Borakovsky today would ever be regarded as a Jew by anyone. Forget, if you don't want to believe that he continued going to church in Israel and in Poland and all that, he was not a religious Jew. And today they never would accept that. Let me go on. Let me give you one more thing before I take the questions. Rav Goren, in seeking to build snifim, it's called a snif, building sfeikot, to try to free the kids of Mamzeros. Number 3, the wedding of Chava and Abraham, that's what Borakovsky took the name Abraham, took place in a church. Of that, there's no doubt. That she runs off with Borakovsky, and they go get married in a church. There is no evidence that they were ever married with two valid witnesses. Chava said they got married Jewishly, and Burakovsky also. But we don't know who the witnesses are. We don't know if it was a valid wedding. We don't know who performed the wedding. No one could tell. There's no evidence of this. So it could very easily have just been, a local Jew in town decides to marry them. So normally we assume they're married. We don't make issues about it. But in a case like this, we do with mamzerus. You got to ask yourself. We don't know who married them. Can we assume that they were really valid witnesses? If we don't know who the witnesses are, why do we assume that they're valid witnesses? Let me give one more of this snifim. If Burakovsky ever converted, we don't know, but assuming he converted, it was done because of pressure from Chava's father. Also pressure from the law. I told you about the statutory rape issue there. This is not an authentic conversion. And Rav Goren, and that's Rav Goren's whole argument. This is not an authentic conversion. Let me give you one more minute. Let me give you because this is very good. One final sniff. This is real lumdus, I think, and it's not from Rav Goren. It's one from the other Dayanim, the nameless Dayanim, but I'll tell you who it is later. Okay, let's assume the conversion of Burakovsky was valid. And let's assume that the marriage was valid to Chava, in which case she never got a divorce, and she married her second marriage, had children. The children were Mamzerim. Burakovsky reverts to Christianity. Of that, there's no doubt, at least according to Rav Goren. And there seems to be, we have the social workers' testimony, the people who lived in the area. Burakovsky just assumed he was a Christian. So he's a Meshumad, right? Burakovsky is Jewish. We're assuming he converted. Then he reverts to Christianity. He's regarded as a Meshumad. Now, there is a rabbi. His name is Yitzhak ben Moshe of Marseille. I'll speak a little bit about him this summer when we're in Provence, because we'll be in Marseille a little bit. But he wrote a book called Itor Sofrim, but we know it as just the Itor. And what does the Itor say? The Itor says something interesting. Itor says that a Meshumad, an apostate, is not able to give a get. So what do you do in a case like this, Barak? If you have a Meshumad, you say that the woman's an aguna, and we know that Meshumad can give a get, because that's when a person converts to Christianity, they always want to make sure that he gives a get. But the Itor says the Meshumad can't give a get. What the Itor says, however, is the marriage ends, but it's not through the get. When a Meshumad gives a get, since technically he's not able to give a get min Torah, what we say is that the marriage is through the authority of the rabbis, the marriage is annulled from the beginning. The sages have the authority to be mevatel a marriage because it's done in accordance with Dat Moshe Yisrael. So it's as if the marriage never took effect. We see this in other cases as well. So when the Meshumad gives the get doesn't take effect from the side of the get in the halachas of gerushin, from the Torah. Based on the Torah, we can give a get. The Torah tells us how to give a get. But when a Meshumad gives the get, according to the Itter, Meshumad can't give a get because he's lost his authority as a Jew to do that. But the marriage ends. How does the marriage end? The marriage ends because the sages, through their authority over marriage and divorce, they make it as if the marriage never happened. Okay, so when Burakovsky gives the get, the marriage from the beginning, it's as if this never happened. So that means that Chava was never married. And if Chava was never married, since her marriage was retroactively annulled, when she married the second time, she never committed adultery. So you see the lumdus here? Okay, I'll leave it at that. I'll come back to it next time. I'll start next class with this lumdus and then related to a marsham, a famous marsham. And then I think we'll have one more class with arguing over the Halakhic dispute over the status of the woman, Chava, and her children. And then let's start getting into some more of the politics, who these Dayanim were. and what the various Dayanim said, because we have letters from Dayanim, the Dayanim who had to be kept secret. So hopefully we'll get to that. Actually, we probably won't get to that next class, but Amir Hashem after Pesach, we'll move into that. And yes, I know a few people have already asked me Rav Soloveitchik's opinion. I'll get to Rav Soloveitchik's opinion. The problem is there's contradictory testimony of Rav Soloveitchik's opinion, but I will give you all the evidence I know, and you can judge it. Now, David says, is the conditional conversion applicable only to converts before a Beis Din of Hedyotos, as opposed to a proper Beis Din? It seems, which would not be able to nullify. It seems, despite the fact the Lashon of the Rambam, it seems that it's before any Beis Din. See, the way they read the Rambam there is that the sages wouldn't convert anyone because they knew that these were not good candidates for conversion. But the Beis Din of Hedyotos converted them. But what's the significance? The Beis Din of Hedyotos didn't know about the idea that you weren't supposed to convert them. In other words, they didn't have this information. So it's not that the Beis Din of Hedyotos per se, that's any less of a conversion, is that they didn't know the information there, and therefore they converted people who should never have been converted, and therefore the conversion is in abeyance. But the issue is not the Beis Din of Hedyotos, as Rav Goren and so many others understand it. I'm sure some understand it as Hedyotos as significant, but most people, as far as I know, don't. The issue is that it wasn't Kiddushin, it wasn't Gerus Hashem Shamayim. It was Gerus Hashem Davar Acher, and they never should have allowed it to happen in the first place. That's the key issue. Now, Gershon, you say that the Rambam in Halacha 17 is talking about hold on, a Beis Din who didn't do a full investigation. Let's see, in Halacha 17. But the important thing of here is not the first part of 17. I just read it, so you get the whole halacha. The first part, the significant part for our purposes, is the second part. That's even if the convert worships Avodah Zarah, he's like an apostate Jew. That's why it was important for me to cite that. The first part of 17 is itself of interest in that there's a dispute. What does this mean if the court didn't inform him of the mitzvah? If you look in the Shulchan Aruch actually doesn't read it that way. Shulchan Aruch summarizes what it thinks the Rambam is saying, that if the court did not inform him of the reward and the punishments. But that's not what the Rambam says. The Rambam, according to pretty much everyone other than the Shulchan Aruch, is assuming that you can convert without knowing the mitzvah. So what would that mean? You come before the rabbis and say, I love the Jewish people, I want to convert, and you'll learn the details later. You know that there's one God, and you want to be part of it. After all, what does the Rambam say? The Rambam says that when someone wants to convert, we teach them a few of the big mitzvos, and we teach them a few of the small mitzvos, and we convert them immediately. No year-long, 2-year-long courses with all these tests to know things. I posted on one of my blog posts questions from one of the Batei Din in Los Angeles questions. No one knows these questions. The Malchei Yisrael and laws of Shemitah and all these things. So that was never done and is not required according to the Rambam. And you don't need, just like you don't need to, you're not going to know every halacha of muktzah. The Rambam is saying you don't need to know, you need to know the big things. But there's a concept of converting without even knowing about Shabbos. You can convert and not know about Avodah Zarah and about Shabbos. So that's what it's referring to there. You can convert on the understanding that you will accept whatever. Well, what is the convert? He comes to Beis Shammai. Convert me on 1 foot. Beis Hillel converts him. How much could he tell him that? But it was understood that it would be L'Shem Shemaim. So that's a very important halacha for other purposes. Now, David says in Bogota, Colombia, there are over twice as many converts than Jews from birth, and they're very pious, yet the established Jewish communities do not permit the converts to join their shuls or to take part in communal affairs. They need to establish their own synagogues. I know in Guatemala, you have the same thing as well. And I'm not sure why that, if that's for halachic reasons, they don't trust the conversions, or they just don't want the converts to take over their shuls. If they got the converts in, all of a sudden the new people are running the show. It might be because of that, but I know you have these converts, and there was a group of them, I think from Columbia, who moved to Scranton, Pennsylvania, believe it or not. As far as I know, they might still be there. I don't live there, so I don't know, but I'm not sure what the reason is, if you can find out. Justin says, Reb Kassan's letter to the Syrian community declaring no conversion is dated in 1935 on wall of Hillel Yeshiva. And since you bring it up, let me hold on. I'm going to show you something right now. I'll just pull it up since you mentioned it. Hold on a second here. I could share it with you as well. I have it on my computer. So I just, there's a few different ones. So here's one of them. This is, you have the, from 1984. And it has from 2006. So actually, I think I also have the one. I have also, I believe, or somewhere the original ban on conversion. I do actually. Here, let me share it with you. Hold on a second. I'm gonna stop the. Oh, actually, I wasn't even here. Let me. Here it is. So here's from 1935, rabbinical proclamation, a sign from Rabbi Kassin, and it says, having observed the conditions prevailing in the general community, etc., etc. Gotta make it a little larger here. It says that no male or female member of a community has the right to intermarry with non-Jews. This law covers conversions we consider to be fictitious and valueless. So we decree that no future rabbinic court of the community should have the right or authority to convert male or female non-Jews who seek to marry into our community. And then it goes on, is citing what happened in Argentina. But notice, and it's signed Rabbi Tawil, Rabbi Kassin, etc. It's explicit there, marriage in the community. No one should convert someone who seeks to marry into the community. And that's even a stringency compared to the original one, where the only issue was you had to get converted in Eretz Yisrael. So how it goes from conversion for the sake of marriage to any convert. And by the way, also, okay, so you can't, no Syrian rabbi can convert someone for the sake of marriage. So let's say someone converts by an Ashkenazic rabbi or a Moroccan rabbi, either for the sake of marriage or just l'shem shamayim. Probably marriage could also be l'shem shamayim. So where do the Syrians get this idea that an Ashkenazi based and converts someone? Now that person goes to the Syrian shul that he shouldn't be counted to a minyan. It's not conversion for the sake of marriage. It's not conversion by the Syrians. It's done by the Ashkenazim and it has nothing to do with anything. Or for that matter, if I convert to Judaism, l'shem shamayim, and then marry my wife, who's Jewish, born Jewish, and then we have children, my son and daughter, they're born Jewish, whether I'm Jewish or not Jewish, they're not converted. I'm not even in the Syrian community. Why should my son have an issue there? So it's there was a rabbi in the Syrian community, Ramatl Babadi. He was sort of like the other big rabbi in addition to Rabbi Kassin. And I'm told that he did not support this decree. But it's a big thing right now. You can't, maybe I shouldn't speak anymore because I speak, I at least I have in the past spoke a number of times in the Syrian community. And now I might be blacklisted because this is like super pious to them, holy to them. So much so, if you look at the New York Times article years ago that dealt with it, when they had the scandal in Deal, I think it was, they had an article in the Times about the Syrian community, and they dealt with the conversion. Rav Avad Yosef came to Brooklyn. He converted a girl himself, and he told them that they should accept her, that she's a valid convert. He did it himself, the conversion. And although for the Syrians, you know that Rav Avadia is greater than anyone. I mean, he is like the ultimate for them. He's not more important than this decree. And they said to them, sorry, Rav Avadia, we're not going to do it. Leah says, Dorshe Torah Tzion is my slate. But Eretz Kodesh has several well-respected people in the St. Louis community on their slate. All the moderate Haredim, Leah, support Eretz HaKodesh. But I want you to find out from these people how they could, in good conscience, I'm asking the same question that Rav Aaron Feldman asks, how they could support a slate and ask people to vote for something which requires encouragement of IDF service. And it doesn't mean IDF service of the others. It means Although maybe, hey, maybe that's how they read it. Now that I think about it, when it says encouraging recruitment and service in the Israel Defense Forces, it means encouraging recruitment and service for the religious Zionists and the irreligious, and encouraging full national service. But says encouraging full national service for anyone exempted in law from service in the IDF. Well, the person who I asked about this, who's a big supporter of Eretz Yisrael, he said that when it says encourage national service, learning Torah is national service. So you can sign that and say we encourage national service, even though most people read it as national service in other ways, but our national service is learning Torah. So that's what he told me national service means. The fact that no one else understands it to mean national service. Uh, David, is there proof that Barakovsky had a phony conversion? No, there's no proof that Barakovsky had a phony conversion, but there's no proof that Barakovsky had a valid conversion. If Barakovsky was living as a religious Jew, you wouldn't need proof. The very fact that he's living as a Jew and accepting the community is the proof. We saw that last week. But if you have someone who's living as an irreligious Jew, not only is an irreligious Jew, one who testimony is he's living at least as a half Christian, then you wouldn't need you would need proof of his conversion. So David says it also says, yeah, those who are exempted do national service. Me. So I was told by someone who's in that world, who's a supporter of Eretz Kodesh, that they can understand national service as here's the word. The word was deliberately chosen, encouraged to allow for fuller Haredi participation. They can honestly say they will encourage participation, etc., etc. National service will include roles like learning, teaching, civilian patrols. So that's not what you and I think of, but that's what they say. And finally, Mel says, yes, there'll be a class next Monday. That'll be the last one for Pesach. Mel asks, the Lundos you cite at the end applies only if Barakovsky gave Chava a get. Did he give her a get? I didn't hear you say that. Yes, he did give her a get. You're right. Thank you for pointing it out. I forgot to mention it. What happened was that Barakovsky and Chava don't get a get. Obviously, that's why she, when she marries Langer, the children are Mamzerim. But then later, when Barakovsky wants to get remarried, in the state of Israel, he can't get remarried because he's on record there as being married to someone, and therefore he gives her a get. So as soon as he gives her a get, he's a meshumed. She's already from the time of their original marriage, she's free. So now here's another interesting point I didn't mention. We have testimony. Chava Langer got married with a rabbi. Name is Levitsky. I think he was in Rishon LeZion. And we have testimony that, again, how reliable this is, that's the debate, that there's this Rabbi Levitsky knew Langer's situation, knew who this Barakovsky was, and he just assumed that he's a guy. And therefore she doesn't need a get. That's what Rav Goren's side says. The other side says that no, that because Chava never told him that they were married. But there are witnesses that claim that, as I recall, that he knew, and he didn't make a big deal of it because she never thought she had to tell him because he was a guy, and he thought he was a guy. The other side says, no, he didn't know. She pulled the wool over his eyes. As far as Levitsky was concerned, she was single. Okay, everyone, thank you. Real Mike Hellman.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll see you next week. Tomorrow, Daphna Siegman at 11 a.m. on Chagaji, I believe. And Rabbi Shulman, his regular 1 p.m. time slot, but he won't be doing Yoshua. He will be talking about, I believe, the sages of Bnei Brak. That's more basically every day, 11 and 1, are shiurim on Pesach, so feel free to 11 and 1 Eastern time for those in Israel. It will be normal time. David, I don't know if you sleep in the day, but 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. Israeli time. I don't know, you're sleeping then because you're up at 3:30 in the morning, so I don't know. But anyways, okay. Everybody, that be well, and your good news. And please invite a friend. I really think the Pesach program is really a fantastic lineup of speakers, and please take advantage and encourage others to do the same. Okay, Laila Tov, everybody, be well.
Have a good night. Good night.
Good night. Good night. Thank you.